Chapter 1. Charlie! John clambered through the rubble toward the place where she'd been, choking on the dust of the explosion. The ruins shifted beneath his feet, and he stumbled over a block of concrete and caught himself just before falling, scraping his hands raw as he grabbed frantically at the broken surface. He reached it, the place where she'd been. He could feel her presence beneath him. He took hold of an immense block of concrete and hefted it with all his strength. He managed to tilt it from the pile and overturn it where it fell with a thud, rattling the ground he stood on. Over his head a steel beam creaked, wavering precariously. "Charlie!" John cried her name again as he shoved another block of concrete away. "Charlie, I'm coming!" He was gasping for breath. The moving the remains of the house with desperate fueled strength, but the adrenaline was running thin. He set his jaw and pressed on. His palm slipped as he tried to lift the next block, and when he looked, he realized, dazedly, that his hands left streaks of blood wherever they touched. He wiped his palms on his jeans and tried again. This time the broken concrete moved, and he bounced it on his thighs and took it 3 steps away, then dropped it on a pile of debris. It crashed down into the rubble and shattered rock and glass beneath it. It starting an avalanche of its own, and then beneath the sounds of wreckage, he heard her whisper, "John, Charlie!" His heart stopped beating as he whispered back to her, and again the rubble moved under his feet. This time he fell, landing hard on his back, knocking the wind out of him. He struggled to inhale, his lungs useless. Then, haltingly, he began to breathe. He sat up, light-headed, and saw what the collapse had revealed. He was in the little, hidden room in Charlie's childhood house. Before then, him was a plain, smooth metal wall. At the center was a door. It was only an outline, with hinges or a handle, but he knew what it was because Charlie had known when she stopped running in the midst of her escape and pressed her cheek against the surface, calling to someone or something inside. "John," she whispered his name again, and the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls of the room. John got to his feet and put his hand on the door. It was cool to touch. He pressed his cheek to it, just as Charlie had, and it grew colder, like it was draining the warmth from his skin. John pulled back and rubbed the cold spot on his face, still watching the door as the shiny metal began to dull before his eyes. The color paled, and then the door itself began to thin. Its solidity vanishing until it looked like frosted glass. And John saw there was a shadow behind the glass, the figure of a person. The figure stepped closer, the door clarifying until he could almost see through it. He moved closer, mirroring the figure on the other side. It had a face sleek and polished, its eyes like a statue's, sculpted, but on seeing John peer through the door between them, his breath clouding the near transparent barrier. Then, suddenly, the eyes snapped open. The figure stood placidly before him, the eyes fixed on nothing. They were clouded and unmoving, dead. Someone laughed, a frantic, mirthless sound that echoed in the small, sealed room. John looked wildly around at the source The laughter rose in the pitch, growing louder and louder. John covered his ears with his hands as the piercing noise became unbearable. "Charlie!" he cried again. John jerked away, his heart racing. The laughter went on, following him out of the dream. Disoriented, his eyes darted around the room, then lit on the TV, where a clown's painted face filled the screen. Caught in a convulsive fit of laughter, John sat up, rubbing his cheek where his watch had been, pressing into it. He checked the time, then breathed again, then breathed a sigh of relief. He had just enough time to go to work. He sat back, taking a moment to catch his breath. On the TV screen, a local news anchor was holding a mic up for a man dressed as a circus clown, down, complete, with a painted face, a red nose, and a rainbow-colored wig. Around his neck was a collar that looked like it belonged in a Renaissance painting, and he was wearing a full yellow clown suit with red pom-poms for buttons. "So tell me," the anchor said brightly, "did you already have this costume, or did you make it especially for the grand opening?" John switched the TV off and headed for the shower. Chapter 2. Just kidding. He'd been at it all day, but the noise was still unbearable. A rattling, clanging, then punctuated by shouts and the intermittent, earth-shaking clatter of jackhammers. John closed his eyes, trying to blot it out. The vibrations resounded in his chest, filling him up, and amid the noise, the sound of desperate laughter. Suddenly, rang in his ears, the figure from his dream came to him again, just out of sight, and he felt as though, if he just turned his head the right way, he could see the face behind the door. "John!" John turned. Louise was standing a foot away, giving him a puzzled stare. "I called your name 3 times," he said. John shrugged, gesturing at the chaos around him. "Hey, some of the guys are going out after this. You coming?" Louise asked. John hesitated. "Come on, it'll be good for you. All you do is work and sleep." He laughed good-naturedly and slapped John on the shoulder. Chapter 2.